He caught her red-handed, a granola bar in her coat sleeve, hands shaking. She didn't beg. Didn't cry. Stared up at him with eyes that made his knees go weak. Because they weren't unfamiliar. They were his daughter's eyes. Exactly. He'd forgotten what hunger looked like. Not the kind solved by a missed lunch or an early dinner. James Talbot's hunger was the kind cured by business deals and catered meetings, never the gnawing ache that drove someone to desperation. But tonight, in the neon-bright aisles of Midtown Market, he saw it up close. Her. She shouldn't have been there. No one noticed the girl at first. The customers buzzed past, eyes on their phones, carts brimming with things to fill a fridge and an empty sundae. The store's speakers chattered a tinny pop song. Security hovered by the door, bored and impatient. No one saw the girl in the battered gray hoodie, sleeves pulled over her hands, body pressed into the shadow between the snack shelves and the refrigerated drinks. No one but James. He didn't know why he stopped. Habit, maybe, or the flicker of movement at the edge of his gaze. At first she was another shadow. Then she shifted, and the sharp lines of her face caught the light. She couldn't have been more than 12, but her eyes were old. Old and tired. She moved fast, too fast for a child browsing. James watched, unnoticed, as her small fingers closed around a granola bar, slipped it up into her sleeve with a quick, practiced motion. Not her first time. Not by a long shot. She was turning away, already mapping her exit, when James stepped forward. No security uniform, no badge, a man in a suit who should have been somewhere else. But for some reason, he couldn't walk on by. He caught her red-handed, a granola bar in her coat sleeve, hands shaking. She froze. He expected pleading, excuses, maybe tears. Instead, she straightened her spine. Her chin lifted, defiant and exhausted. Her voice, when it came, was steady but scraped raw by too many cold nights. "I'm not stealing," she said. "I needed something to eat." James studied her, the way a person might stare at an old photograph, startled, uncertain. She didn't look away. Her eyes were wide, brown-green, framed by lashes heavy with dust. Eyes that made his knees go weak. Because he knew those eyes. Had loved those eyes once, in another face. Sophie. His daughter. For a moment, the past cracked open in the supermarket air. The last time he'd seen Sophie, the arguments, the empty place at the breakfast table. He shook himself, trying to find the words, but the girl stared, daring him to call for help. Behind them, a mother called to her child. A register beeped. The world kept spinning. James spoke, the way you do with wild things. "You don't have to do this," he said. "If you're hungry, I can help." The girl's lip curled, a smile, but more a warning. "You gonna buy my silence? Or the granola bar?" She didn't beg. Didn't cry. Stared up at him with eyes that made him feel something he hadn't felt in years, helpless. The seconds stretched out, heavy and breathless. Where she'd come from, how long she'd been invisible. Why, of all the stores in all the city, she'd ended up here, caught by a stranger who saw his daughter's ghost every time he blinked. He hesitated, heart racing. The world had never taught him what to do in moments like this. He was good at contracts, at closing deals, at walking away. But he couldn't walk away now. James took a slow breath, lowering himself to her level, careful not to crowd her. "What's your name?" he asked, voice softer than he meant. She stared, silent. A single heartbeat, then another. "Does it matter?" she said, barely above a whisper. It did. More than she could know. In that moment, between the hum of the store and the crackle of fluorescent lights, James Talbot saw a life split open. His and hers, and somewhere, the memory of a daughter who once looked at him the same way. He offered his hand, not to take, but to give. "You're not in trouble," he said. "Let's get you something to eat. Something real. My treat." The girl's eyes flickered, torn between suspicion and something softer. She didn't move. For a moment, James wondered if she'd vanish altogether, a wisp of smoke, a dream. But then she nodded. Once. And in the echoing brightness of the supermarket, the story began. James waited for her to move, afraid that one wrong word would scatter her like a bird. In the hum and echo of the supermarket, the world narrowed. A man in a suit, a girl with dust on her cheeks, and a single battered granola bar hidden up her sleeve. The rest of Midtown Market faded, the tired cashier, the bored security guard, the parade of ordinary people living out their Thursday night rituals. She looked at his hand as if it were a trick, then at his face as if trying to read something behind his eyes. The storm in her expression was too much to bear. Suspicion, calculation, hope, all tangled up with something harder. Experience, maybe. Or the memory of being let down. James lowered his hand, not wanting to press. "You can pick anything," he said, his voice gentle but uncertain. "No catch." She hesitated, then straightened, the too big hoodie swallowing her shoulders. Her eyes, his daughter's eyes, darted down the aisle, measuring exits. She shifted the granola bar in her sleeve, but didn't let it go. Hunger and pride, fighting it out. "Can I get soup?" she asked, voice so small he missed it. "Of course. Whatever you want." Together, they walked the length of the aisle, James pushing his abandoned cart, the girl drifting at his side. She never quite let herself be beside him, always half a pace behind, ready to bolt. She moved through the store with the alertness of someone who's learned to expect the worst. Her eyes catalogued everything: cameras, guards, the glances of strangers. James tried to act normal, but his hands shook as he gripped the cart. He caught a glimpse of his reflection in the freezer door. Rumpled suit, hair thinning at the temples, eyes wide with something close to panic. He looked like a man who'd seen a ghost. She headed straight for the soup aisle, bypassing the glossy cans for the dented, the discounted, the kind that required hot water and hope. She chose a cup of noodles, pausing over the choices before finally picking chicken. James watched her, wanting to say something, anything, but unable to break the spell. He followed as she made her way to the bread section, eyes lighting up at a discounted loaf near its expiration date. She didn't reach for sweets, didn't even look at the cookies. The staples. Food for surviving, not for joy. He couldn't help himself. Get something else, too. Maybe a drink? Juice? As if the question itself was a luxury she hadn't earned. She settled on a carton of chocolate milk, clutching it to her chest like it might vanish if she blinked. James added a few more things to the cart: a pack of bananas, a box of crackers, a small bag of apples. Each time, she looked at him with wary curiosity, as if waiting for him to change his mind, to reveal the catch. They reached the checkout in silence. The cashier, a girl not much older than the one at James's side, gave them both a long, measuring look but said nothing. The granola bar stayed hidden up the sleeve. James wanted to tell her to put it on the belt, but he didn't. Some things were more important than teaching a lesson. He paid in cash, watching the girl's eyes flick to the bills, then to the security guard still posted at the door. When the bag was packed, she scooped it up before he could offer to carry it. Muscle memory. Survival. They stepped out into the city's cold breath. Rain still misted down, painting the pavement silver and blue. Cars hissed past, horns blaring in the near distance. James took a breath, dizzy with the strangeness of the moment. He turned to her, wanting to say something that would matter. "Is there somewhere you need to go? I can call someone. Or get you a cab." She flinched, a fraction. "Don't need a cab." Not pushing. The air between them was thick with questions he didn't dare ask. "Where are your parents? Why are you alone? Who taught you to steal food so?" Instead, he gestured toward a bus shelter at the edge of the lot, a place half-lit, but dry. "You want to sit for a minute?" She eyed him again, then nodded once, sharp and sure, as if making a deal with herself. She followed him to the shelter, sliding into the farthest corner, bag clutched tight. James sat on the other end of the bench, leaving space, careful not to crowd her. The city bustled around them, people hurrying home, umbrellas blooming like black flowers, the night pressing close. But under the plastic roof, there was a fragile bubble of stillness. As she opened the bag, pulling out the soup and the milk, arranging them with a quiet, ritual care. She didn't eat right away. She stared at the food for a long moment, as if waiting to be told to put it back. James felt something old and unsteady stir in his chest. Guilt. Memory. The ache of every night he'd worked too late, missed every school recital, forgotten to call Sophie one more time. How a person could live so long and miss so much. Finally, she spoke. "Why'd you help me?" Her voice was matter-of-fact, not grateful. "You don't know me." He swallowed, searching for the truth. "You," he said, finally. "And you looked like you needed help. That's all." She studied him, weighing his words. "You gonna call the cops now? Or social services?" The old habits, the old bruises, written in her voice. "No," James said. "I'm not calling anyone. Unless you want me to. I wanted to make sure you're okay." For the first time, her expression softened, a tiny shift, there and gone. She opened the soup cup, sniffed it, and smiled. "This is the good kind," she muttered. James watched her eat, slow and careful, as if each bite had to last. The way Sophie used to pick the raisins out of her oatmeal, the way she'd curl up in his office chair with a blanket on the rare nights she stayed at his place. What she'd think if she saw him now, a man in a suit, sharing a bus bench with a stranger's child. The girl glanced up, catching him watching. "You got kids?" she asked. James hesitated, surprised by the question. "Yeah. A daughter. Sophie. She's about your age." The girl nodded, as if this made sense. "She live with you?" "Not right now. Her mom and I. Things got complicated." She didn't push, nodded again. "My mom says things get complicated a lot." A gust of wind rattled the shelter, sending a flurry of leaves across the empty street. James wondered if this was what regret felt like, sitting in the rain with someone else's lost child, wishing you'd done things differently. He tried again. "What's your name?" She hesitated, looking away. "Emma," she said finally. "Emma Lane." Relief and sadness in equal measure. "Nice to meet you, Emma." Sipping her chocolate milk. "You don't have to be nice. Most people aren't." James shook his head, stung by the matter-of-fact way she said it. He wanted to argue, to say not everyone was bad, but the truth hung heavy between them. Sometimes, the world didn't care. Sometimes, the world walked right past. Emma tucked her legs up, shivering despite the layers. "You not gonna call anyone?" "No," he said, and meant it. "I want to know you're safe." She studied him a long time, then finally, inaudible, said, "I used to have a safe place. But things changed." James waited, not pushing, letting her speak at her own pace. "My mom got sick," she said, voice tight. "We lost the apartment. She tried to get better, but people stopped helping. It was easier to leave." It all, the pain, the pride, the disappointment. How many times she'd told this story, how many times she'd watched adults' faces shut down. James nodded. "Where is she now?" Emma's mouth pressed into a thin line. "Hospital, I think. Or maybe back at the shelter. I don't know. Sometimes she disappears for a few days. Says it's safer if I stay out of sight." James's hands clenched in his lap. The world was big and cold, and sometimes, it forgot the people who needed remembering most. He tried to smile, to offer something real. "Well, tonight you don't have to hide," he said. "You can sit here as long as you want. I'll wait with you, if that's okay." Emma looked at him, eyes shining in the streetlight. For the first time, he saw a flicker of relief, small, trembling, but real. "Thanks," she whispered. They sat together in the hush of rain and neon, the city moving around them. For a while, no one spoke. James watched the headlights sweep across puddles, felt the ache of years gone wrong. If Sophie ever felt like this, lost, invisible, needing someone to see her. He made a silent promise, there in the glow of the bus shelter, he wouldn't walk away this time. Not from Emma. Not from anyone. Minutes ticked by. The city shifted, grew quieter. Emma finished her soup, wiping her mouth on her sleeve. She leaned back, eyes heavy, but didn't move to leave. James cleared his throat. Do you have anywhere to go tonight? Anyone waiting for you? Emma shook her head, not meeting his eyes. Not. Sometimes I stay at the shelter. But it fills up fast. If you get there too late, you sleep outside. Chest tight. You don't have to do that. Not tonight. I can help you find a place. Or, if you want, you can stay at my place. For tonight. The offer hung between them. Heavy, impossible, dangerous. James knew how it sounded. A grown man, inviting a child home. The city had rules about these things. But the thought of leaving her to the dark, the cold, the indifference of the world, it was unbearable. Emma studied him, weighing risk against hope. For a long moment, James thought she'd refuse. Then, she nodded. Tonight, she said. Until morning. James smiled, a lump rising in his throat. Until morning, he agreed. He stood, offering his hand again. This time, after a heartbeat's hesitation, she took it. They stepped out into the rain together, an unlikely pair, a man haunted by his past and a girl trying to outrun hers. The city loomed around them, huge and indifferent. But for a little while, in the glow of headlights and hope, they were not alone. And somewhere, deep in James's chest, something shifted. Something began to heal. He glanced down at Emma, the girl with his daughter's eyes, and made himself another promise. He would not let her disappear. Not now. Not ever again. The city at night was another kind of wilderness, one James Talbot had never learned to navigate. Not. The wet pavement glared with the reflections of 1,000 red and green lights. Horns echoed off brick walls and puddles. There was the sweet smell of frying onions from a corner cart, the cold promise of a storm in the air. James pulled his collar up against the drizzle, glancing down to see Emma walking half a pace behind, her head down, food bag gripped tight, as if she might have to run at any moment. She looked smaller out here, beneath the street lamps and the city's endless appetite for forgetting. At first, neither of them spoke. James fumbled for his keys, rehearsing explanations in his head for the doorman, for the night concierge, anything to make this strange situation seem less strange. But Emma kept her eyes forward, her steps light and silent, like she was used to being invisible. They reached his car, a sleek, black sedan, shining with rain, and James paused, uncertain. He opened the passenger door and waited. Emma hesitated for a second before slipping inside, moving quick, like she knew you never waited long in one place. James slid behind the wheel. The leather seats, the faint scent of expensive aftershave, the quiet tick of the clock, all of it felt alien. He realized, not for the first time, that his whole life had been built to keep discomfort out, and now it was sitting next to him, knees drawn up, staring out the window. He cleared his throat, started the engine. "You okay?" he asked. Emma nodded. "Warm in here." He turned up the heat a little, watching her in the rear view. She looked everywhere but at him. The silence was thick but not hostile, the kind you get when two people have too much to say and no words for any of it. They pulled away from the curb. James's building wasn't far, a luxury tower with a lobby that smelled of lilies and lemon polish, where the staff wore suits and everyone acted like they belonged. He worried for a moment what they'd think, seeing him come in at this hour with a stranger's child, but that worry faded as he glanced again at Emma's tired, wary face. He parked in the underground garage, led the way to the elevator, tapping his keycard. Emma followed, hugging the bag close, flinching at the mirrored walls. The elevator music was a bright, artificial thing, out of place in the hush of the night. They rose, floor after floor, James's heart beating faster the higher they went. At last, the doors slid open onto a quiet hallway, carpeted thick enough to muffle footsteps. His apartment was at the end, overlooking the city. He let them in, flicking on soft lights. Inside, the space was all glass and open air. Tall windows, pale furniture, everything so It looked staged, not lived in. Emma hovered near the door, not daring to cross the threshold. "You can come in," James said, trying for a smile. She stepped inside, eyes darting from the kitchen to the bookshelves, to the family photos, so few of them and all old. She stopped at a frame by the TV. James and Sophie, maybe 5 years ago, on a beach somewhere. Sophie's hair in a wild ponytail, James's smile awkward, uncertain. Emma stared for a long moment. "That your daughter?" she asked. James nodded, a little surprised at how much the question hurt. "Yeah, that's Sophie." "She looks happy," Emma said, her voice soft. "She looks safe." The words like a small stone dropped into water, the ripples spreading outward. He didn't know how to reply, so he gestured to the kitchen. "Are you hungry? I could make something hot. Or there's more in the bag if you want." Emma shook her head. "Soup's good. I'll save the rest." James busied himself with the kettle, watching her from the corner of his eye. She didn't touch anything, didn't sit, stood there, waiting for the rules. She reminded him of stray animals he'd tried to rescue as a boy, always expecting to be chased off, always ready to bolt. He set a steaming mug and bowl on the counter. "You can sit, you know. Or, there's the couch." Emma perched on the edge of a barstool, eating in small, neat bites. The city lights spread out behind her, endless and bright. For a moment, James let himself look at her. The dirt smudged on her cheek, the scrape healing on her knuckle, the defiant set of her mouth. He tried again. "How old are you, Emma?" She looked up, wary. 12. 13. Thinking of Sophie at that age. Thinking how she'd begged him for a phone, for weekends at his place, for time. Always time. And how he'd always been too busy, too distracted. Emma was watching him, reading every flicker of doubt on his face. "You're not used to this," she said. "No," James admitted. "I'm not." "It's okay," Emma said. "Most people aren't." For a while, the sound was the hum of the fridge, the distant traffic below. Emma finished her soup, setting the cup aside with careful hands. "You have a room here?" she asked. "For guests." Embarrassed by the luxury he'd never noticed. "Yeah, you can use it. There's clean sheets and towels. And, you can shower, if you want. No one will bother you. I promise." Emma nodded, not thanking him, accepting the offer like a dare. She took the bag of food, slipped from the kitchen, and James showed her to the guest room, a place barely used, with a bed made tight as a hotel, a little stack of books on the nightstand. He pointed to the bathroom. "Everything's clean. There's soap and stuff in there." Emma nodded, shutting the door behind her. James leaned against the wall, letting out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. If he'd done the right thing, if he was out of his depth. About calling someone, social services, his ex-wife, anyone. But the image of Emma's face, the wary gratitude, kept him still. He wandered back to the living room, restless. He picked up the photo of Sophie, running his thumb over the glass. How long since he'd talked to her? Talked? He tried to remember the last thing she'd told him, and felt a flush of shame when he couldn't. After a while, he heard the shower, water running, then silence. Emma emerged in borrowed pajamas, Sophie's, left over from a visit years ago, her hair damp, her face scrubbed clean. She looked impossibly young, frail, but there was a new steadiness in her gaze. James brought her a blanket, showed her how to work the lamp. "If you need anything, knock," he said. "I'll be in the next room." Emma hesitated in the doorway. "Why are you helping me?" she asked again, quieter now. James searched for the right answer. "Because someone should," he said finally. "Because sometimes the world forgets to care. And sometimes, you need one person to remember you exist." Emma nodded, thoughtful. "Most people walk by." James felt the weight of that truth. "I'm sorry for that," he said. She looked at him for a long moment. "You're different. You look like you miss someone." "Tired." "I do." Emma slipped into the guest room, closing the door behind her. James sat on the couch, the city spreading out below, his heart beating with something old and new at once. Fear, hope, and the stubborn need to do something right for once in his life. He stayed up late, listening for sounds from the guest room. Footsteps, crying, the soft click of the door. But the apartment stayed quiet. The movement was the city beyond the glass and the faint, steady hum of hope waking up inside him. When sleep finally came, James dreamed of Sophie, her laughter, her anger, the way she'd looked at him the last time she said goodbye. And for the first time in years, he let himself hope there was a way back. For her. For Emma. Maybe even for himself. Morning would come soon enough, with new questions and old wounds, but for tonight, in the high quiet above the city, two people who might have been forgotten found a place to rest. And neither one was alone. Morning came soft and gray, the city below awash of early light and half-awake car horns. In the quiet, James Talbot lay on his side, blinking against the daylight pressing in through glass. For a second, he forgot everything: the supermarket, the bus stop, the girl in the borrowed pajamas. Then he heard the faint clink of a spoon in the kitchen, and the memory settled. Last night hadn't been a dream. He pulled on an old sweater, padded barefoot down the hall. The apartment felt different, as if someone had moved the air around. There was a smell of instant coffee and toast, and the sound of rain, steady now, against the glass. He found Emma standing at the counter, hair still damp from her late shower, stirring a mug of cocoa. The pajamas were a little too short, Sophie's name stitched on the hem. She looked up as he entered, watchful but not startled. The tension in her shoulders had softened, a fraction. James hesitated in the doorway, uncertain. He'd spent a lifetime being in charge. Corner office, board meetings, even his own house. But here now, he felt oddly out of place in his own kitchen. "Did you sleep?" he asked. Emma shrugged. "A little." She looked away, embarrassed. "Your bed's soft. I'm not used to that." Not wanting to make it awkward. "You made cocoa?" "Back. You had packets. I used water. Hope that's okay." "It's more than okay," James said, smiling. "Help yourself. There's food, too." She slid a plate across the counter, 2 slices of bread, toasted and buttered. "I made you some," she said, her voice shy. James sat across from her, touched more than he cared to admit. He took a bite, trying not to seem too eager. For a while, they ate in silence. Rain streaked the windows. The city rumbled on, uncaring, but inside the apartment there was a hush, a sense of something fragile building. After a while, Emma asked, "What do you do? For work, I mean." James chewed, then answered honestly. "I run a company. Investments. Real estate. Mostly, I sit at a desk and try to keep things from falling apart." Emma nodded, thoughtful. "Is it hard?" He considered. "Sometimes. It can be lonely, too. There's a lot of noise, people always wanting things. Sometimes I wish I could stop. Be quiet." Emma sipped her cocoa, thinking. "My mom used to say money solves everything. But it doesn't, does it?" James shook his head. "No. Not everything." Emma set her mug down, hands wrapped around it for warmth. "Why'd you help me last night?" He hesitated, searching for words that felt true. "You reminded me of someone," he said. "Someone I miss. And, because I was there, and you needed help, and I couldn't pretend I didn't see you." Emma didn't smile, but she didn't look away. "A lot of people see me. They keep walking." James heard the truth in her voice, the long ache of disappointment. "I'm sorry about that," he said. "Not your fault." But it felt like it was, somehow. Or maybe he wanted to believe he could fix a piece of the world, even if he'd failed at so many others. After breakfast, Emma wandered to the window, peering out at the streets far below. "Looks different from up here," she said. "Smaller." James joined her. The city was a maze of shining roofs, endless movement. "It's easy to forget what it feels like on the ground," he admitted. Emma nodded. "Down there, nobody's small. Not if you're scared. James thought of the girl he'd found in the supermarket, how invisible she'd seemed, how she'd melted into the crowd. Of Sophie, of every time he'd promised to show up and hadn't. Do you want to call your mom? He asked. Emma shook her head, arms crossed. I never know if she'll answer. Sometimes she's in the hospital. Sometimes she's gone. Is there anyone else? James asked. Someone you trust? Emma didn't answer for a long time. Then, there was a teacher at my old school. Ms. Carter. She used to let me eat lunch in her room. But I don't go there anymore. James nodded, his heart heavy. Would you like to try to find her? Or, someone from before? Emma shook her head again, more fiercely this time. I don't want to go back. People always promise to help, but it never lasts. It's better if you keep moving. James felt the helplessness rising again, the old ache of wanting to save someone and not knowing how. I'm not trying to take you anywhere you don't want to go, he said, steady and quiet. You can stay here as long as you need. But if you want to talk to anyone, my lawyer, a social worker, anyone safe, I can help with that, too. Or I can. Listen. Emma studied him, wary but curious. You mean that? Yeah, I do. She turned away, pretending to watch the rain, but James saw her knuckles whiten on the window frame. How many times she'd had to weigh trust against survival. For a while, they stood together, side by side, watching the world below. It felt peaceful, the way real families are sometimes. Two people, sharing silence, letting it heal. Then, as if she'd practiced it, Emma asked, What's Sophie like? James blinked, surprised. He tried to summon a picture of his daughter, how she'd been, who she was now. How many details he'd forgotten. She's smart, he said. Stubborn, too. She likes puzzles, and books about animals. She hates being told what to do. I guess that runs in the family. Emma smiled. You miss her, huh? Every day, James admitted. I wish I could tell her that. Emma looked at him, eyes wide and serious. Maybe you should. The words settling inside him like a small, needed weight. Yeah, maybe I should. They spent the morning in a rhythm that felt strange and new. Emma reading on the couch, James at his laptop pretending to work but mostly watching her, afraid she might vanish if he looked away. Every so often she'd glance up, catching his gaze, and the space between them would fill with questions neither quite knew how to ask. Near noon, Emma wandered into the kitchen again. You got more cocoa? She asked, shy. James grinned. I'll make a fresh cup. Her as she rummaged in the cupboard, finding a battered puzzle box, one of Sophie's, left behind like everything else. Emma dumped the pieces on the table, sorting them with a kind of fierce concentration. James joined her, their hands brushing as they searched for corners. For the first time, he heard her laugh, a soft, surprised sound, out of place. Did you do these with Sophie? She asked. Sometimes. She always finished before me. Emma found a blue edge, set it in place. Maybe you should call her. James looked at her, and realized she wasn't talking about Sophie anymore. She was talking about herself, about being found, about being remembered. He swallowed, emotions crowding his chest. Maybe I will, he said. Would you want to meet her? If things were different. Emma shrugged, not looking up. Maybe. If she wanted to. James smiled, a little sad. She would. The afternoon stretched on, slow and gentle. Emma napped for a while on the couch, her arms curled around the puzzle box. James watched over her, a silent guardian, feeling the strange ache of hope and regret, mingled in a way that felt holy. When she woke, she sat up blinking, looking around like she'd forgotten where she was. For a moment, panic flickered in her eyes. Then she saw James, still in the armchair, and she relaxed. Can I stay another night? She asked, voice barely more than a whisper. James nodded, heart aching. As long as you want. Small and genuine. Thanks. He made dinner, pasta, salad, bread warmed in the oven. Emma ate, thanking him without words. Afterward, she helped clear the table, washing dishes with careful hands, as if afraid of breaking anything. Later, as the city lights began to blink on, James found himself at the window, staring down at the glowing streets. Emma joined him, their reflections side by side in the glass. "You ever get scared?" she asked. James thought for a moment. "All the time," he said. "But it's easier when someone's there with you." Emma nodded, eyes shining. "Yeah, it is." They stood together, quiet and still, while the city spun on below. And for the first time, James felt like maybe, he'd done something right. Night in the city doesn't stay silent for long. The hush of early evening, windows glowing, people drawn to warmth, was always James's favorite time. But with Emma here, the quiet felt less like an escape and more like a secret waiting to be discovered. He made tea in the kitchen, pouring hot water over 2 bags and letting the steam rise. Emma sat at the dining table, legs curled beneath her, working the puzzle in small bursts. Sometimes she'd frown and push a piece away, sometimes she'd line up the colors by shade, her whole body tense with focus. It was a child's way of finding order when the rest of life refused to make sense. James watched from the doorway, letting himself believe, if for a moment, that things could stay like this. A safe place, a warm apartment, the gentle rhythm of voices and cups clinking. But old habits and old fears die hard. He sat across from Emma and slid a mug toward her. She eyed it suspiciously, then accepted, both hands wrapped tight around the cup. "Do you like it here?" he asked. "It's warm. Quiet. Nobody yelling." James nodded. "You can stay as long as you need." She didn't thank him, not in words, but something in her eyes softened. For a while, they sipped tea in companionable silence. But the world outside didn't stay away. James's phone buzzed, vibrating across the countertop. The name, Linda, his ex-wife, and for a moment, dread settled on his shoulders. He excused himself, stepping out of earshot. "Hello." Linda's voice was tired, clipped. "James, are you picking up Sophie this weekend or not? She says you haven't called." Guilt stung him. "Sorry. Things have been complicated. Can we talk later?" "James." Her tone shifted. "Are you all right? You sound strange." He glanced back at Emma, hunched over the puzzle. "I'm fine. Give Sophie a hug for me, okay?" He hung up before Linda could ask more. When he turned, Emma was watching him, her expression hard to read. "You got family?" she asked. "Yeah, I do." He hesitated. "It's complicated." Emma nodded, as if she'd expected nothing less. "Everything's complicated." They finished their tea. Emma cleaned up, stacking cups neatly in the sink. She was careful, moving through the apartment with the soft footsteps of someone who didn't want to disturb a thing. Afterwards, James pulled out a box of old board games. He let Emma pick. She chose checkers. They played 3 rounds in a row, each a little less cautious than the last. Emma played to win, fiercely, her eyes sparkling with the thrill of competition. "You're good," James said, grinning as she jumped his last piece. She smiled. "My mom taught me. Said you gotta be smart, 'cause the world doesn't care if you lose." "She sounds smart." Emma shrugged, brushing a hand over her eyes. "She tries." It was after 9 when Emma yawned, barely trying to hide it. James offered her the guest room again, made up fresh sheets, tucked a book beside the pillow. Emma paused in the doorway, looking at him with a mix of gratitude and wariness. "Why do you trust me?" she asked. James was taken aback. "I don't know," he admitted. "I do. Sometimes you have to." Closing the door. James sat up for a long time, unable to sleep. He tried to read, tried to write emails, but his mind kept circling back to Emma. What if someone came looking for her? What if this was all a mistake? He'd heard stories, good intentions gone wrong, men accused of things they never did. But then he'd think of Emma's small hands, the way she'd watched the world from under that battered hood, and the fear faded, replaced by something fiercer. The need to protect. To do right. Rain tapped the windows all night. Sometimes, James thought he heard Emma stirring, wandering the apartment. Once, he found her in the kitchen, curled up on the floor beside the dog bed he'd kept from before the divorce, asleep with a blanket over her shoulders. He lifted her, carrying her to the guest bed. She woke enough to mumble, "Didn't want to make a mess." "You're not a mess," James whispered. "You belong here. At least for tonight." In the morning, sunlight glared in through the glass, making the city look new. Emma was already up, toast made, dishes washed. She moved like a shadow, silent, efficient, careful not to take up space. James offered her eggs, pancakes, anything, but she shook her head. "Don't wanna use too much." He insisted, making breakfast for two. She ate, eyes flicking to the door every few minutes. After they ate, James turned serious. "I want to help, Emma. Not for tonight. I could find you a place, if you want. Or, you could stay with me. At least until your mom comes back." Emma looked torn. She set her fork down, fidgeting with the napkin. "If you tell anybody, they'll make me leave. They always do. No one will make you do anything you don't want. But I need you to be honest with me. Is there anyone looking for you? Any place you have to be?" She hesitated a long time. "Sometimes the shelter people come looking. But I don't have anywhere else. I go where it's safe." James nodded. "This is safe. For as long as you need." Him, eyes searching his face for some sign of a lie. Then, "Thank you." The rest of the day moved slow. They finished the puzzle. James showed Emma how to make spaghetti sauce, letting her stir and taste, her small face alight with concentration. She talked more, about school, about books, about the city from the window. And for the first time, laughter echoed in the apartment. Emma's, light and real, like water over stone. James felt it in his bones, the healing. But the outside world wouldn't stay away forever. That afternoon, a knock sounded at the door, a sharp, official knock that set James's heart racing. He opened it to find a building security guard and a woman in a city badge. "Mr. Talbot?" she asked, polite but firm. "Sorry to bother you, but the desk reported seeing a young girl coming and going. We're conducting a welfare check. Is everything all right?" James's mind spun. In the background, Emma's face blanched. She started to back away, but James held up a hand, gentle. "She's my guest," he said. "Her mother is ill. She needed a safe place." The woman nodded, but her eyes were sharp. "May I speak with her?" Emma looked at James, panic rising. He gave her a small, steady nod. "It's okay. You can talk to her." Emma stepped forward, shoulders tight, voice thin but steady. "I'm fine. Mr. Talbot helped me. He didn't do anything wrong." The woman knelt, her tone softer. "What's your name, sweetheart?" Emma hesitated. "Emma Lane. And your mom, do you know where she is?" Emma looked at her feet. "She's sick. Sometimes I stay at the shelter. But it's full." The woman scribbled notes. "Do you want to stay here, with Mr. Talbot?" Emma glanced up at James, eyes pleading. "Yes," she said, stronger this time. "I trust him." The woman stood, weighing them both. "All right. I'll make a note. But if your mom turns up, or you want us to call anyone, let us know. Mr. Talbot, we'll need your contact information." "Protocol." He gave it, hands trembling a little. When they left, Emma let out a long, shaky breath. "They always want to take me away," she said. "Even if you're nice." James knelt beside her, steady. "They're trying to keep you safe. So am I. You can trust me." Emma looked at him, something shifting in her eyes. "I believe you," she whispered. They sat together in the late afternoon light, the world outside finally quiet. And for the first time, James realized he wasn't helping Emma, she was helping him, too. Reminding him what it meant to care, to show up, to stay. That night, as darkness fell, James checked on Emma one last time. She was already asleep, curled up on the bed, Sophie's old book clutched to her chest. Her breathe, let the hush settle over the apartment. Tomorrow would bring new questions. But for tonight, they both belonged somewhere. And in the vast, hungry city, that was a kind of miracle neither of them would ever forget. James woke before dawn, his mind already turning circles. Old habits, early calls, emails, news, rose up in him, but he pushed them away. Today, those things didn't matter. Not compared to the girl asleep down the hall. He fixed coffee and wandered the silent apartment. The world was still blue and silver outside. The city, so sharp and hungry the night before, seemed softer, blanketed by fog, as if even the streets were giving them a rare reprieve. He found himself standing at Emma's door, listening for the steady rhythm of her breathing. There it was, soft, regular, the sound of trust earned one quiet night at a time. He turned away, heart full of questions, and began the small rituals of morning. By the time Emma woke, the sun was up. She padded out, hair wild, still wearing Sophie's pajamas, and blinked at him in the kitchen. "You're up early," she mumbled. James smiled. "I never sleep late. Habit." Emma poured herself some cereal, careful not to spill, and joined him at the table. For a long moment, they ate in companionable silence. Then Emma set her spoon down, serious. "They're going to come back, aren't they?" she asked. "The lady with the badge." "They always do." James hesitated, not wanting to lie. "They might. To check on you. To make sure you're safe." Emma's mouth pressed into a thin line. "They'll want to send me away. To a group home. Or foster care. Or someplace worse. Not if you tell them the truth. That you're safe here, and want to stay until your mom comes back." Emma looked unconvinced. "Sometimes it doesn't matter what you say. Grown-ups decide for you." James felt the helplessness rising again, the impossibility of making promises he couldn't keep. "If they come, I'll be here. I'll tell them the truth, too." She was quiet for a moment, then, "You won't let them take me?" He reached across the table, squeezed her hand. "Not if I can help it, Emma. I promise." Something in her face softened. And started eating again. The morning stretched on, each moment measured in small kindnesses. James showed Emma how to scramble eggs. She showed him a trick with the puzzle, how to find all the corner pieces first. They listened to the radio, laughed at a silly commercial, let the day find its own slow rhythm. But by late morning, the world outside pressed in again. James's phone buzzed with messages. From Linda, "Sophie says you missed your call again. Please try." From his office, urgent, deal deadline moved up, "Where are you?" From an unknown number that made his stomach clench. He stepped onto the balcony, trying to keep his voice low. "Hello." A thin, tired woman's voice answered. "Is this Mr. Talbot? My name is Rose Lane. I think my daughter is with you." James felt his heart lurch. "Emma." The woman coughed. "I'm at the hospital. Social services told me they found her. Said she was safe with someone named Talbot." "Is that you?" "Yes. She's here. She's okay." Relief, but also a bone-deep exhaustion. I'm sorry. I didn't want her out there alone. Her voice broke. "Can I talk to her?" James went inside. "Emma," he said. "Your mom's on the phone. She wants to talk." Emma froze. The spoon in her hand trembled. Her eyes filled with a storm of emotions, hope, fear, anger, longing. She took the phone, holding it with both hands. "Mom." Her voice was so small it nearly vanished. There was a long, crackling silence. Then, "Hi, honey. I'm okay. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Emma's jaw clenched. She didn't cry. "When are you coming back?" "I don't know yet. The doctors want me to stay a few more days. They said you were safe, with a good man. Is that true? Emma's eyes flickered to James, then away. Yeah. He's okay. James felt something loosen in his chest. The conversation was awkward, stilted, love and guilt and a dozen things unsaid hanging heavy between them. Emma tried to be brave, but James could see her struggle. When you get out, can I come see you? Emma asked, voice breaking. Rose coughed. I hope so. I'll call again. Be good, okay? Emma nodded, even though her mother couldn't see. Okay. When the call ended, Emma handed the phone back, face blank. She always says she'll call. Sometimes she does. James wanted to tell her it would be different this time. But he'd learned, maybe too late, that sometimes the best thing you can do is stay and listen. Would you like to write her a letter? He asked. Sometimes that helps. Emma nodded, silent. They spent the next hour at the kitchen table, Emma hunched over a piece of paper, tongue between her teeth as she wrote. James made himself useful, cleaning, tidying, anything to give her space. When she finished, she folded the note tight and tucked it in her pocket. What did you write? He asked. Emma shook her head. It's for her. Respecting the secret. The rest of the day unfolded. An old movie, Emma picked, something with cartoon animals and bad jokes. She let herself laugh, once, twice, her guard slipping for minutes at a time. Lunch was peanut butter sandwiches, cut in careful halves. James told stories about Sophie when she was little. Her obsession with dinosaurs, her stubbornness, her wild, bright laugh. Emma listened, eyes wide, smiling. For a little while, the apartment felt like a home. The world was kept at bay, and the ache in both their hearts eased. That afternoon, James got another call, this time from the woman with the city badge. Mr. Talbot, we've spoken to Emma's mother. She'll be released soon. Would you be willing to keep Emma until then? James didn't hesitate. Of course. Thank you, the woman said, her tone gentle. Emma is lucky to have you. James glanced at Emma, her careful, hopeful face, her fists still balled tight. I think I'm the lucky one, he said. When he hung up, Emma was watching. I get to stay, she whispered. For now. Until your mom is better. Emma's relief was sharp and bright. For the first time, she smiled and didn't try to hide it. Thanks. That night, as the city fell quiet, Emma curled up on the couch, the puzzle on her lap, the letter to her mom pressed tight in her hand. James sat beside her, not touching, present. About all the things he'd lost, marriage, time, his daughter's trust, and all the things he still could choose to save. Emma had reminded him, sometimes you can't fix everything, but you can show up. You can stay. Outside, the city spun on, endless and uncaring. But inside, the hush was sacred, a pause in the storm, a promise kept, a small miracle blooming in the simplest of places. And in that quiet, James made himself a promise. When Sophie came home, he would be ready. He would listen. He would stay. The days that followed settled into a new rhythm, fragile, normal. Each morning James woke before Emma, the apartment still and peaceful, the old anxieties replaced by something steadier. He brewed coffee, scrambled eggs, listened for the soft patter of Emma's feet on the hallway carpet. She would emerge, hair sticking up in every direction, always a little wary at first until she saw him, and then her shoulders would drop. They didn't talk much about the future. Neither of them knew what it held. But in these borrowed days, they found comfort in small rituals. They made pancakes together, sticky with syrup and laughter. Emma insisted on setting the table, folding napkins with the careful precision of someone who never took things for granted. Sometimes, James would catch her staring out the window, watching the world hurry by far below. What she was thinking, about her mother, about what came next, about how easily you could lose everything and still wake up to another day. One morning, James found Emma on the couch with Sophie's old sketchbook. She was drawing, quick, bold strokes, a city skyline, a girl sitting on a rooftop with her knees pulled to her chest. He sat beside her, letting the silence stretch. That's you, he asked. Emma nodded. It's easier to draw than to talk. He understood. There were things even grown-ups couldn't say out loud, especially not when the world felt like it might change at any moment. Later, they ventured out. James took Emma to the little cafe on the corner. She ordered hot chocolate and a blueberry muffin, savoring every bite. She told James about her old neighborhood, about the library she used to visit with her mom, about the cat she'd named Lightning because he was fast and always hungry. James listened, learning the language of Emma's life, the details that made her real. How much he'd missed with Sophie, how many small moments had slipped through his fingers while he was busy with things that didn't matter anymore. After lunch, they stopped at a park. Emma swung high, face tipped to the sky, laughing without fear. James pushed her, careful at first, then letting go when she asked. Other parents watched, some with curiosity, some with the distant kindness of strangers who remember being scared. As the sun dipped low, Emma grew quieter. The shadows on the playground lengthened, and her laughter faded. On the walk home, she clutched James's sleeve, her hand cold and small. That night, as James tucked her in, Emma asked, "Do you think my mom's coming back this time?" He sat on the edge of the bed, searching for honesty. "I hope so, Emma. I do. And if she needs help, we'll figure it out. Together." Emma stared at the ceiling, silent. Then, "You won't forget me, will you?" The question hit James in the chest. "Never. You're not someone who could ever be forgotten." Emma didn't answer, but when she rolled over, he saw the edge of a smile on her face. James stood in the darkened hallway, the apartment quieter than ever. Of Sophie, of all the ways he'd failed to show up when she needed him most. He made another silent promise. To Emma, to his own daughter, to the part of himself that still believed in second chances. He would not disappear again. The next afternoon, the phone rang. Emma and James were building a fort in the living room, blankets strung between chairs, pillows piled high, Emma giggling as she tucked herself into the small, secret space. James answered, heart in his throat. It was Rose, Emma's mother. "They're letting me out tomorrow," she said, her voice thin but hopeful. "They said Emma can come see me. I want to, thank you. For keeping her safe." James swallowed. "You're her mom. That's what matters. But if you need anything, help getting back on your feet, a place to stay, please ask. Don't try to do it alone." Rose was quiet for a long moment. "I'm tired of being alone, Mr. Talbot. Maybe we could try together. At least for a little while." When he told Emma, she didn't react at first. She kept adjusting the blankets of her fort, jaw tight, not looking up. "Are you okay?" James asked, kneeling beside her. Emma shrugged, face half in shadow. "I want her to be better. I want to go home. But I'm scared." He reached in, offering his hand. "You don't have to go anywhere you don't want to. You get to choose, Emma. And if you need me, I'm here." Emma took his hand. For a long time, she didn't let go. That night, they made spaghetti and watched old movies, laughter echoing in the quiet rooms. Before bed, Emma drew a new picture. Two people on a rooftop, watching the city together. She handed it to James. "It's us," she said. "So you don't forget." He hugged her, fiercely, feeling the tears prick behind his eyes. "I'll never forget," he whispered. In the darkness, as Emma slept, James sat by the window, city lights glittering far below. Tomorrow would bring change. But for tonight, in the hush of hope and fear, he understood something simple and true. Sometimes, the family you choose finds you in the strangest places, and when it does, you hold on and do not let go. He would be there, for Emma, for Sophie, no matter what came next. And for the first time in years, James believed he might finally become the father he'd always wanted to be. Dawn broke clear and cold. James barely slept. He found himself sitting at the kitchen table before sunrise, hands wrapped around a mug of coffee gone cold, watching light creep over the city. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Emma's face, heard her voice. "You won't forget me, will you?" He knew, in that quiet hour, that he couldn't. He wouldn't. When Emma woke, she padded into the kitchen in her borrowed pajamas. For the first time, she looked a little less like a stranger and a little more like a kid, hair tangled, eyes soft with sleep, clutching her sketchbook to her chest. She climbed onto a stool and sat in silence, watching James. "You hungry?" he asked, not trusting her voice yet. He made pancakes, Emma's favorite, and let her stir the batter. The kitchen filled with the small comforts of normal life. The sizzle of butter, the sweet smell of syrup, the sound of Emma's quiet humming as she set the table. As they ate, Emma picked at her food, glancing at the clock every few minutes. "What time do we have to go?" she asked. "Whenever you're ready," James said. "There's no rush." Emma nodded, but the anxiety in her eyes didn't fade. What if she's not okay? What if they send me away anyway? James set down his fork. "Whatever happens, I'm not leaving. I'll be there, every step. If you want to come back here, you can. If your mom needs help, I'll help. You're not alone, Emma." She stared at him a long moment, trying to decide if she could believe it. Then she looked away, silent, but a little of the tension in her shoulders eased. After breakfast, Emma went to her room to pack. She didn't have much: her old clothes, the new sketchbook, the letter for her mother. James knocked. "You ready?" he asked. Emma didn't turn around. "I guess." He crouched beside her, gentle. "Are you scared?" "Yeah. But not like before." James ruffled her hair. "That's brave. Braver than you know." They left the apartment together, Emma's small hand gripping his tightly. In the elevator, she pressed her face to his sleeve, silent, trembling. James tried to be steady for both of them. The hospital was a world apart. Fluorescent lights, the sharp scent of antiseptic, the endless shuffle of shoes and clipboards and tired faces. James signed them in. Emma shrank behind him, eyes wide, clutching the sketchbook like a shield. At last, a nurse appeared. "Are you Emma? Your mom is waiting for you. This way." James started to follow, but Emma hesitated. "You'll stay." "Of course," he promised. "I'm right here." They walked together, Emma's steps growing smaller with every hallway. When they reached the room, the nurse smiled. "Go on in, sweetheart." Emma stood in the doorway, frozen. Her mother, Rose, looked up from the bed, pale, thinner than before, but her eyes were clear and shining with tears. "Emma," she whispered. Emma took a single step, then another, then ran into her mother's arms. Rose clung to her, crying and laughing, pressing kisses into her tangled hair. For a moment, the world shrank down to them. James stood back, heart aching with relief and something that felt a little like envy. Envy for a bond he could never quite understand, even as he felt honored to have held a place in it. Rose pulled back, wiping her eyes. "You grew," she said, voice breaking. "You look safe. You look okay." Emma nodded, shy. "Mr. Talbot took care of me. He let me stay. He made pancakes." Rose smiled at James, gratitude in her eyes. "Thank you," she said. "Thank you for not letting her disappear." James shook his head, voice rough. "She saved me, too." There were questions, of course. A social worker sat with them, asking about plans, where they would go, what they needed. Rose was honest. "I need a little more time. A place to start over. A chance." James spoke up. "You both can come to my apartment. Until you're back on your feet. No pressure, no strings. Stay." Emma looked at him, hope and fear and longing written plain across her face. Rose hesitated, pride and worry warring in her eyes. Then she nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. "Thank you," she whispered again. The social worker nodded. "Let's do it right this time. We'll check in, make sure everyone's safe. But this is a fresh start." Back at the apartment, everything felt different. The air buzzed with hope and nerves. Rose took the guest room. Emma slept on the couch by choice. "For tonight," she said, "so Mom won't be scared." James cooked dinner, trying to make the apartment feel like a home, not a shelter. After dinner, Emma showed her mother the sketchbook, page after page of dreams and fears. Rose listened, cried, then started to laugh, real, from the gut laughter that shook the walls and made Emma smile for the first time all day. James watched, his heart full of Sophie, of every lost moment, every mistake, and knew he was being given a second chance, even if it wasn't with his own blood. Later, Rose sat with James in the kitchen, hands wrapped around a mug of tea. "I don't know what comes next," she admitted. "I'm scared." James nodded. "Me too. But we can figure it out. Day by day." Exhausted but hopeful. "Thank you for seeing her. For not looking away." James swallowed the lump in his throat. "It's the least I could do. I'll keep helping, if you'll let me." Emma drifted in, already half asleep, and wrapped her arms around her mother, then, shyly, around James too. He hugged her back, gentle and careful. As night settled, Emma fell asleep listening to the sound of her mother's voice, James reading from the couch. Outside, the city was as wild and uncertain as ever, but inside, something true had begun. A family, imperfect but real, born out of compassion and a little luck. James sat up long after the others had gone to bed, watching the city lights, thinking of all the ways one small act of kindness can open a door that never closes again. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring. But for the first time in a long time, he wasn't afraid to find out. The days that followed weren't easy, but they were real. For the first time in years, James's apartment was full of voices, laughter, even arguments. The ghostly quiet he'd lived with so long was gone, replaced by the uneven heartbeat of a family learning to live together. Rose, still fragile, did her best to help. She cooked simple meals, folded laundry, and every afternoon she and Emma took slow walks around the block, letting the city air settle in their lungs. Emma was always close by her mother's side, sometimes fiercely protective, sometimes a child again, chasing pigeons, collecting stray bits of gravel in her pockets, sketchbook tucked under one arm. James tried not to hover, but he couldn't help it. Every morning, he'd brew a second pot of coffee, set out bowls of cereal, and remind himself this wasn't charity. This was something he needed, too, a chance to be needed, to show up and keep showing up. At night, after dinner, Rose and Emma sat at the kitchen table, sharing stories from before things got hard. Memories of sunlit parks and warm kitchens, Emma's first day of school, the stray cats they'd rescued and let go again. Sometimes James listened from the living room, letting their voices fill the spaces where regret used to echo. But healing wasn't simple. Rose still had doctor's appointments, sometimes came home pale and silent, retreating behind a closed bedroom door. Emma would pace the apartment, eyes darting, old habits rising, checking the locks, hiding her shoes near the bed, sleeping with the light on. James learned to be gentle. He learned when to ask, and when to be present. Some days, Emma was full of energy, making lists of things she wanted to do. Visit the library, ride the subway to see where it went, bake cookies from scratch, not a box. Other days, she hardly spoke, her old defenses creeping back in. But every time James showed up, every time he sat with her, fixed a broken puzzle, or listened, he saw her trust inch a little closer to the surface. James still thought of Sophie every day. He'd started calling her again, sometimes leaving messages, sometimes catching her between classes or on her way to soccer practice. Each time, their conversations grew a little less stiff, a little more honest. One evening, after Rose and Emma had gone to bed, James found himself staring at Sophie's picture on the mantel. He picked up the phone, put it down, then dialed. This time, Sophie answered. "Hey, Dad," she said, not cold, not distant. "Tired?" "Hey, Soph," James replied, his voice steady. "I wanted to hear your voice." There was a pause, then a sigh. "You sound different." James smiled. "I am. A lot's changed." They talked about nothing and everything, her classes, her friends, the weird new kitten her mom had brought home. James told her a little about Emma, about how sometimes helping someone else can help you find your own way back. He didn't say everything, not yet. But he let her hear in his voice the hope he felt, the new strength in his days. Before they hung up, Sophie said, "I miss you sometimes. I don't know how to say it." James's eyes burned. I miss you every day. I want to do better, sophomore. For you. There was silence, then a soft, okay. Me too. The next morning, Emma surprised him by asking, do you think Sophie would want to meet me? James was caught off guard. I hope so. Would you want that? Emma shrugged, but hope flashed in her eyes. Maybe. If she's nice. He grinned. She's stubborn. But I think you two would get along. They decided to invite Sophie over the next weekend, a simple dinner, no pressure. Rose was nervous, Emma was shy, and James found himself worried he'd let both girls down. But when he told Sophie, she sounded excited. I'll come, Dad, she said. I want to meet her. And you. The days leading up to the dinner were tense, but full of anticipation. Emma cleaned the apartment top to bottom, fussed over which sketch to give Sophie as a welcome present. Rose baked bread, her hands steady, her eyes shining with something like hope. James practiced his spaghetti recipe, triple-checking the sauce and letting Emma taste test. Finally, the evening arrived. The apartment was filled with nervous energy. Emma changed outfits 3 times. Rose set the table, hands trembling a little. When the doorbell rang, James felt a jolt of nerves. He opened the door, and there stood Sophie, taller, older, but with the same spark in her eyes he remembered. She hugged him, quick and fierce, then stepped inside. This is Emma, James said, voice thick. Emma stood in the middle of the living room, hands behind her back, looking everywhere but at Sophie. For a moment, neither girl spoke. Then Sophie smiled, a slow, real smile. Hi, she said. Dad says you're tough to beat at checkers. Emma grinned, a challenge flashing in her eyes. I am. And like that, the tension eased. They spent the evening laughing, playing games, swapping stories about James's terrible jokes. Rose sat, watching her daughter bloom, her own smile never fading. Late that night, after everyone had gone to bed, James stood alone in the living room. The apartment felt alive, full of warmth and voices and hope. He let himself believe for the first time that second chances were real, that you could lose everything and still find your way back. He whispered a silent thank you to the world. For the girl who'd needed help, for the daughter who'd forgiven him, for the small, stubborn hope that kept him going. Tomorrow would be another day. But tonight, they were a family, held together by the simplest miracle of all, someone choosing to stay. Morning broke golden and quiet, sunlight spilling across the floorboards, washing away the shadows of the night before. James lay awake in bed, listening to the hush of the apartment. Sophie's light footsteps, Emma's soft laughter from the kitchen, the faint rattle of Rose opening the window to let in the city air. For once, there was no ache in his chest, no regret that stung sharper with every breath. A sense of being right where he was meant to be. He found them gathered in the kitchen. Emma was teaching Sophie how to fold napkins into birds, her hands moving, sure of themselves in a way that made James proud. Rose poured coffee, her face bright with a tired, grateful happiness. For a moment, they were a family. Messy, imperfect, and together. Breakfast was noisy, full of laughter and gentle teasing. Sophie told stories about her new school. Emma described her favorite corner of the park, the one spot where the city felt small and safe. Rose promised they would go together someday, when the weather was better. James watched it all, feeling the last walls around his heart finally come down. He wasn't a bystander anymore. He was part of this story, not the man who watched from the outside, but the man who showed up, even when he was afraid. After breakfast, Sophie pulled him aside. You look happy, Dad. Surprised at how true it was. I am. For the first time in a long time. Sophie nodded, then hugged him, quick and fierce. Don't disappear again, okay? He hugged her back, the promise settling deep inside him. Never again. Over the next weeks, routines grew up around them like vines. Morning coffee, lunches packed in brown bags, afternoons in the park. Emma's drawings filled the fridge, each one brighter and braver than the last. Sophie visited often, and sometimes Rose's laughter would ring through the apartment, startled and full, as if rediscovering something she'd forgotten was hers. Emma still had hard days. Sometimes the city felt too big, sometimes the old fears crept back in. But now, when she woke from nightmares, there was always someone there. A mother's gentle arms, a friend's soft voice, the safe glow of a hallway lamp left on for her. One afternoon, as they walked together by the river, Emma squeezed James's hand. "You saved me," she said, not quite meeting his eyes. James shook his head, smiling. "I think you saved me, too." They stood for a while in the sunshine, the city sprawling out before them. Messy, alive, full of stories waiting to be written. Emma looked up at him, hope shining in her eyes. Do you think things can stay good?" James squeezed her hand tighter. "Maybe not always. But we can make them good, one day at a time. We keep showing up. We keep trying. That's what matters." Emma nodded, the old fears fading in the warmth of his words. That night, as twilight settled, the apartment glowed with the soft light of lamps and laughter. Dinner was a noisy, happy mess. Burned toast, overcooked pasta, stories swapped across the table. Afterward, they piled onto the couch, Sophie and Emma arguing over the movie, Rose falling asleep before the credits. James watched them all, this improbable family he never could have imagined, and felt a gratitude deeper than words. He'd learned at last that love wasn't something you found by luck or earned by being perfect. It was built in small, stubborn acts, buying a granola bar for a hungry girl, calling your daughter even when you didn't know what to say, forgiving yourself and others, day by day. Later, as Emma drifted off to sleep on the couch, James tucked a blanket around her and pressed a gentle kiss to her hair. She looked up, sleepy but certain. "You'll be here in the morning, right?" Tears in his eyes. "I promise." Already half in dreams. James stood at the window, looking out at the city. Still vast, still unpredictable, but no longer so lonely. He wasn't afraid of what tomorrow might bring. Not anymore. Because this time, he would not walk away. And in the golden hush of night, the story that began with a stolen granola bar and a pair of familiar eyes found its way home. Not perfect, but real, and finally, unbreakable.